welcome to What Next? Moving on from Domestic Abuse, an STME Giving Strength show. I'm Sonia Kavanagh from Sonia Kavanagh Counselling Services, and I'll be your host for the panel discussion today. We're coming to you as an online panel today, thanks to COVID. However, we would like to thank Next Step for offering us their new office space in Tuggerah for the filming and for supporting the show. We look forward to paying you a visit in the real world soon. I'd like to acknowledge that we were meeting on the land of the Darkinjung people, and we appreciate this and respect them and their elders, past, present, and emerging. Stronger Than My Excuses will be producing a number of episodes on topics on both business and community issues, so keep an eye out for those. Today, however, we are discussing ways to move on and gain back our sense of self after going through a domestic abuse or violence situation. With me today is my co-host Kylie Smith from Liberty Life Consulting and author of Overcomer, Crowned in Freedom. Kylie has certainly moved on, and I'm looking forward to hearing her contributions today. Welcome, Kylie.
Thanks for having me, Sonia. We have a great panel lined up to help us today. Our aim is to have a discussion to come up with real ideas for our audience to understand the actions they can take to gain their own freedoms and get their life back. If you have an urgent issue, please call 1-800-RESPECT. That's 1-800-737-732. There is also a list of numbers you can reference at the end of this video if you need other services.
Thank you, Kylie. So important. So, Kylie, would you also like to introduce our lovely guests for today?
I'd love to. Please welcome our special guests, Leanne Nunn, psychologist and author.
Thanks, Kylie. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. Danielle Habib, domestic and family abuse specialist from Catholic Care.
Hello, Kylie.
Welcome today. And Leonie Hannah, mentoring manager for Happiness Habits Incorporated.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you all. Welcome to the show, everyone.
Thanks, Kylie. So just before we ask the first question, I'd like to acknowledge and thank our sponsors who you see on the screen now. We couldn't do without you, and we really want to thank our primary sponsor as well. And also thanks to our videographer and editor, Sarah from Atlantic Studios.
As the name suggests, Stronger Than My Excuses shows are created to help you, the viewer, to have strength and confidence to take action. But we call these STME Giving Strength shows, as we know that domestic abuse is never an excuse. So every show will wrap up with action tools. As you're watching on YouTube or other social media, please ask questions and we will answer as quickly as possible.
So let's start our discussion today, and let's start with why. Today we are talking about what next for domestic violence and domestic abuse victims. You've moved out of crisis. What are some of the issues you might face in trying to move to that next step of freedom from no longer being a victim, but actually being a survivor? Leonie, in your work with Happiness Habits, in your mentoring role, you would have seen this issue. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
I think one of the main things that women and everyone that, survivors struggle with is finding that positive mindset and having the tools to find that. So that could look like, gaining professional support. So having access to that professional support and gaining access to that can be really tricky at times. Also, they might be looking for, that sense of self-worth and finding ways to find that. So again, gaining social connections with like-minded women or other people that have been through, other survivors of domestic violence and family abuse. I think they're some of the main things that people face when they're coming out of that victimized state. So,
yeah, thanks, Leonie. What about you, Leanne, in your work as a psychologist? I'm sure you would have seen some barriers and issues in wanting to move forward.
Yeah, I think for women, it's about setting themselves realistic expectations at that point. They've come out of a massive, one of the biggest things they're ever going to experience in their lives, and they're trying to start again often from nothing. So setting realistic expectations and really small goals and steps, and recognizing each one as they get to them, so they start feeling more in control of what's going on around them, instead of feeling like everything's out of their control. So small steps and realistic steps, and then recognizing each one of those as an achievement when they're accomplished.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Such great thoughts. And what about Danielle and your work with, helping families move forward out of their crisis situation? What are some of the barriers?
I think one of the big barriers is starting to look after yourself and starting to really practice self-care. So for so long, you've had that self-worth chipped away, as Annie was speaking about before, and actually being able to take that time and care for yourself, and even understanding, well, what is self-care? How do I do that? That starts that healing process to be able to start moving forward.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that, Danielle. So let's move on to some outcomes. So how does it look for someone who has perhaps gained this freedom, and what is maybe the ideal outcome and some of the benefits for survivors as they take some of those small steps that we were just talking about and looking after themselves? So Kylie, you've seen these benefits in your own life. What outcomes do you think people can expect as they achieve this?
So the word freedom it's actually my favorite word. I have it tattooed on my hand, actually, that I am free. Finding that freedom when you come out of a toxic or domestic abuse relationship is huge. The greatest outcome was knowing that I had a choice in life. I didn't need to allow life to just happen to me, but I was free to make choices in every area. I remember this defining moment where I had hit rock bottom, and I remember, those reflective moments you're by yourself, and I was in the car, and I remember thinking I can use this to hold me back, like as a stumbling block to hold me back. And in fact, I'd have every reason to, or I could use it as a stepping stone to rebuilding my life. And I love that I had the choice. No longer was I controlled, but I had a choice in that moment.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that. And Leonie, of course, you are also helping people rebuild their confidence. So, what have you seen maybe in some of the people that you've helped?
I think some of the benefits are they gain that sense of self-worth, and that is such a big tool for them to then use. They find their strengths and they work on those strengths and move forward. And, they have better connections with people. They can build stronger and healthier relationships and connections with people, and they can look for financial and just self-independence as well, which can be amazing and a massive thing of freedom once you have those tools and those steps towards that. So.
Yeah, that's really helpful for people to know that there is support out there.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So Leanne, how about you? Moving on to outcomes, what does it, in your opinion, look like to start gaining that freedom?
I think it's important to recognise this as a transition period. So there's likely to be ups and downs. Often the abuser is still around and there's still influence from him in your life. And you've got to keep recognising that you're taking steps forward, but there might be times when it's really hard. I think this is when women find, I think Leonie mentioned as well, that strength they didn't know that they had. And just pull it from somewhere that the resources they didn't know they had inside them, and they learn a lot about themselves in this time. So as much as they're gaining freedom, it's kind of freedom to be a new you. And I think that's a journey worth taking, whatever brought you there. It's a journey worth taking. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So that's what it's like, really gaining that sense of self back. Hey?
Yeah.
Danielle, what are your thoughts about moving towards that, those outcomes?
Oh, Sonia, I often hear women say, I'm no longer looking over my shoulder. I'm not coming to a home, to a house full of tension, watching everything that I say, and having to keep the kids quiet. A lot of the women say, I now have the freedom to be myself, and I feel like I have the old me coming back. But that's not to say that there is periods in life where they will tend to sink back down, but it's ensuring that having those strong supports around them to help them keep strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me also, you know, I've seen people really struggle with the idea of that they can now actually make their own choices for their own lives, and they haven't been able to do that for quite a while. So they often doubt themselves and second guess themselves. And but, you know, one step at a time, like Leanne was saying, how they can start to make those small decisions for themselves and start to feel empowered. So thank you for that. Wonderful contributions. All right. So our next question is about how can someone start setting up their own future, and what actions can they take to gain complete freedom and move to that next step? So Leanne, as a psychologist, can you draw on your experience in your practice and give us some examples of actions people can take to achieve those outcomes we've just spoken about?
Yeah, I think one thing that gets rattled, and I know everybody's kind of alluded to this as well, one thing that gets rattled when you're living with abuse is this trust you have in yourself, this idea of trusting your gut response or listening to your own values. So to me, the key in this point is self-awareness. It's reconnecting with yourself, knowing what's setting you off or what brings you peace, and then acting on that. But just knowing yourself better, I think, is the first part of that, the first step of reclaiming your life.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thanks, Leanne. And how about you, Leonie?
I think something I see is people struggle with their communication. And so one thing that they can do is to get some education, you know, even if that can be vocational or self-education, you know, just learning. And because they've lived in that habitual environment where they're, you know, often becomes codependent living in that situation, they don't know how to be with other people. So finding like-minded people and social connections, I think, get yourself a mentor, like just, you know, someone that can support you and advocate for you and also help you keep accountable to those goals that you're trying to achieve. So
yeah, that's really wonderful. And Kylie, you've seen some outcomes for yourself as well. So how can, you know, people move towards those?
Yeah, intentionality was important for me and people that I work with. It's already been mentioned, Danielle said it so well, surrounding yourself with the right tribe. Get those people that can build you up when you're down and who can encourage you when you're at those rock bottoms and cheer you on, and be your own cheerleader. You're worth cheering on. You have a bright future, and sometimes when we come out of that, it looks hopeless, our future, but I know that with intentional choices, one day at a time, and sometimes a moment at a time, and giving yourself permission to ride the roller coaster of that, I think is really key. Also intentional on what to leave in the past. Like there's some things that don't serve you, and yeah, we can't change our past, but we can start to rewrite the rest of our story.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward more so than looking into the past. And Danielle, you have some thoughts around this as well?
Yeah, Sonia, I have worked with a lot of women, and we find that when we have clear goals and they're set out and looking at, well, what do I want to achieve, and looking at what are the steps I need to take And as Leanne said before, starting off with those small steps. What are those small goals that I can start with? That helps to build that confidence. And then it gives you that mental space to be able to look at longer term goals. So just starting off small and achievable goals.
Yes, and I agree. And there's a lot of frustration around that, though, isn't there? Because they find themselves in this place of new freedom, and there's so much that they do want to do and can become overwhelming. But if they just do one thing at a time, and that can help build that confidence and move towards that freedom. Okay, so lastly, I'd like to ask you all for your one word to wrap up the actions we just spoke about. One word that is an action that viewers can take away from this show. Your one word, Leonie.
Mentoring.
Kylie.
Believe.
Danielle.
Self-care.
Leanne.
Reconnect.
And mine is looking forward. That's 2 words, but there you go. So thank you all for your insights and contributions. What amazing information for our viewers. I know it will help so many people. Also, thanks to Next Step for offering us their new office space in Tuggerah, even though we couldn't get there today. Thanks again to our videographer and editor, Atlantic Studios. I hope you'll watch again next time as we tackle other issues and come up with some more action plans. Thanks to my co-host, Kylie Smith, author and owner of Liberty Life Consulting.
Thanks again to all our sponsors. We appreciate your support on this topic today. Remember, you can watch us through YouTube and subscribe so you never miss another episode. We are also on social media platforms where you can comment and like, or even ask a question, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. You can share with anyone you think this show might help. Remember, if you have an urgent issue, please call 1-800-RESPECT. That's 1-800-737-732. Thanks again to our guests, Leanne Nunn, psychologist and author.
Thanks very much for having me, Kylie. It's great to be here.
Danielle Habib from Catholic Care.
Thank you, Kylie. It's been amazing sitting on this panel with some very strong women.
Great. And Leonie Hannah, Happiness Habits Incorporated.
Thank you. Thanks, Kylie. It's been great.
And of course, please thank our wonderful host today, Sonia Kavanagh from Sonia Kavanagh Counselling Services.
Thank you, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Well, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.